Hey class, I'm Brandon Pickett here with chapter 9 of our book, and this one's about communication. Many of us are communicators, and so you would think this would come rather naturally to us, but there's some really interesting parts in this book that I wanted to kind of go over with you, starting with the first slide, which is the definition of communication, which is the process of transmitting information from one person to another to create a shared understanding and feeling. Again, that process of transmitting information from one person to another is kind of like what we're doing here. I'm transmitting information to you. Hopefully we'll have a shared understanding and feeling. There's actually a process. That next slide shows the process. First, I encode the information. The sender encodes it, and then we pick a channel to use. Sometimes that's email, sometimes it's face-to-face. This is through video, so that's the channel. Then the receiver decodes that, which is what you're doing. And then there's feedback. Now, face-to-face, I can see the feedback. I can't see feedback here, but through the discussion board, I'll be able to get your feedback on this. And then, of course, that last one is noise. That happens to all of us. Different kinds of noise that can block or mess up the transmission, distorts, changes in any way the message the sender intended to communicate. This can happen through all kinds of ways. It could happen through a buzzing phone because of text messages, or it could be a baby crying, a dog barking, it could be the television on, it could be you're playing a game or you're doing something at the same time, or it could just be that you're just not paying attention. And so there's noise. If you want to look at that next slide, this is more of a graphical presentation of the communication process. Sender encodes the message, picks the channel, the receiver decodes it, and of course you're always having to battle and combat noise. The next slide is about nonverbal communication and one-way and two-way communication. Nonverbal communication, I thought this was amazing. When we're talking, only 7% of the words really get through. What's the next one after that? 38% vocal intonation. And finally, 55% facial and body expression. How important is it? Our facial expression, our body expression, all that. So it really is more than just words. And finally, you see that one-way and two-way communication. One way is information flows just one direction, just kind of an information dump. But then two-way communication is the best because we actually can have that back and forth between the feedback from the sender and the receiver, so we can see how it is. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Barriers to effective communication, and this might be the most important part of the chapter, I believe, because it's something we all have to battle. These barriers, starting with selective perception, not hearing things that you don't want to hear, or only hearing things that are consistent with what you already believe. What about misperception? The message is not decoded really well by the receiver and you have misperception. Filtering, people receive less than the full amount of the information due to withholding, ignoring, distorting information. There's information overload. Sometimes we try to pack too much stuff and the receiver can't totally digest all of it. Then you have organizational barriers. All of our organizations could have potential barriers to effective communication between people. Then you have cultural barriers. Man, this is really important, especially in our urban areas. Some cultures have low context, which means they really just rely on the words. Then there's high context. Oh, there's so much more than the words that you have to know about. And then there's noise. In fact, some of our missionaries that I get to work with from time to time tell us that they have to deal with things even like certain cultures not even having certain colors, like the color blue in sub-Saharan Africa. And so they wouldn't talk about how blue the sky is because the receiver wouldn't understand what they were saying or how important that was. So you always have to understand your cultural barriers. Next, we need to work on our skills, don't we? Communication skills, starting with listening. That's might be the most important skill and the one that we all need to work on. Active listening requires the receiver to tune out noise and concentrate on the message. How many times have you been talking to somebody and they are looking past you? It may be somebody better that they want to talk to, or just not paying attention, or they're talking to you while they're texting. Not really doing active listening, are they? We also have to work on our writing skills, understanding that it's not just about punctuation and grammar, but about style and tone. And by the way, pages 345 to 351 have some great tips on how to work on all these skills, from listening to writing to presentation to meeting skills. Yes, there's skills when it comes to meetings, starting with who should be there. Have you prepped the people that are going to be there? Are you prepped to give whatever you're going to do? Is everybody prepped with what they're expected to do? And then after the meeting, are you going to follow up with action items on why we even attended that meeting to begin with? So all those are fantastic communication skills. The next slide really has different types of communication media, starting with the internet. Then there's collaboration software. It says in the book about SharePoint, but I love Google Docs, which is almost like real-time collaboration. And then there's Evernote. And then you have intranets. Each company may have their own intranet that people work on. But I'm finding more and more people are using like Microsoft software, like Microsoft Teams, which allows you to actually break up your team into certain groups, working on certain projects, and then communicate within those projects. So communication media. How about this next one? Media richness, which depends on 4 things. How rich the media is. Starts with interactivity. Is there the ability for feedback? Right now there really isn't, because I'm just doing one-way communication to you, but through the discussion board I'll be able to hear back from you. But it's not the highest level of richness. The ability to transmit multiple cues, which is good. Video has that. Language variety, conveying a broad set of concepts and ideas. And finally, personal focus of the media. This one I'm broadcasting to a wide variety of people, but if you're doing one-to-one, you can really personalize. And so that's why face-to-face is the highest media richness, followed by video conferencing, telephone, instant messaging, then email, personal written communication, and finally the lowest form is formal written communication. Of course, you get that all the time probably in your mailbox, and if you're like me, a lot of that mail goes right into file 13, into the trash can. One of the last slides I have here, getting close to the end, is organizational communication, starting with downward communication. That's higher level employees talking down into the organization. Next is upward communication, those who are employees talking to management. Then there's horizontal communication, which is one employee on the same level talking to another employee from that same level. And finally, you have diagonal communication, and that's the kind of tricky one where you have one person maybe lower in an organization on a different team communicating with someone higher or someone from a different team. Now, I actually had this happen to me today where one of the people I supervise, one of their volunteers called me to talk about the person I'm supervising. They had a problem with that person and they called me. So they kind of hop, skipped, and jumped over maybe protocol. That was all right. But I told them I'm going to be talking with this person you just talked to me about. And immediately after I got off the phone, I called the person and said, hey, one of your people that you're supervising called me. That was diagonal communication. You have to be careful with that. And so he and I talked about how to deal with that. And so that way we hopefully save relationships, but also we're keeping the communication lines open. The last slide is really about this question that we're supposed to ask, this final question. And the one I have for you today is really, which barrier to effective communication do you feel causes the most problems or noise for communicators? And you can even personalize this. Which one causes you the most problems, or which one do you have the most trouble with? And if you want to even add to that, what's the best way to overcome that barrier? I don't know which one it is for you. I know with me, it depends on the day and the week sometimes of which one I have to deal with, but we all have these barriers to effective communication, and the best way to continue the communication lines, keeping them open, is to get over those barriers, get the noise out of there, and so people can hear and understand and digest exactly what we're saying the way we intended it. Hope you enjoy this. Thank you so much. God bless.